The Iranian captain made his decision at 0347. 2 torpedoes, 40 knots, 11,000 yards to the most powerful warship ever built. He had trained for this moment for years. He believed the water would hide him. He believed surprise would be enough. He was wrong on both counts. He had been wrong since the moment he entered the strait. This is not a story about American firepower. Every navy on Earth knows the United States has more of it. This is a story about information. Who had it, who didn't, and how completely that asymmetry determined every outcome before a single weapon was fired. The Iranian Strait of Hormuz engagement is the most instructive live-fire test of competing naval doctrines in a generation. Its lessons are not comfortable for anyone. Not entirely. 12 hours before the torpedo launch, a P-8A Poseidon had already decided the engagement's outcome. 140 acoustic sensors dropped across 60 square miles of the strait. Overlapping fields, no gaps. A surveillance grid so dense it could detect, track, and classify a submarine that believed it was invisible. The Iranian Kilo made contact at 0214, bearing 112, speed 3 knots, depth 380 feet, riding the thermocline, the natural acoustic shadow layer that submarine commanders have exploited since the Cold War. The Iranian captain's choice of that corridor was not naive, it was professional. The thermocline degrades sonar performance in ways that conventional patrol doctrine cannot fully compensate for. He had studied his approach. He had selected the best available path. Under any previous generation of American surveillance capability, it might have worked. It did not work. It could not work. Not against 140 sensors with overlapping coverage. Not against a network that was listening to the entire strait simultaneously. The contact data reached Ford's Combat Information Center within seconds. 2 MH-60R Seahawks repositioned above his track at 0322. Dipping sonars locked. Firing solutions updated continuously. 25 minutes before the Iranian captain decided to shoot, the weapons that would kill him were already in position above his head. He had no idea. That is the first lesson of this engagement, and it is the most important one. Asymmetric doctrine, the strategic logic that has governed Iran's naval planning for 4 decades, depends on one foundational assumption. The weaker power controls the terms of engagement. It chooses the moment. It chooses the method. It forces the stronger power to react. Remove that assumption, and the entire architecture collapses. The P-8A sensor grid did not defeat Iran's submarine. It defeated Iran's doctrine. The submarine was just the consequence. At 0347, the captain fired. The compressed air ejection sent 2 torpedoes into the water and sent an acoustic transient through every American hydrophone within 20 nautical miles. To the sensor grid, it was not a surprise attack. It was a confirmation. 2 weapons, bearing 094, closing at 40 knots. Ford's crew had 43 seconds. They used fewer than 5. The AN/SLQ-25C Nixie decoy deployed from the carrier's stern almost instantly. A towed device replicating Ford's acoustic signature with sufficient fidelity to fool a torpedo's seeker head. The first Iranian weapon locked on to the false signal, chased it, passed 275 meters from Ford's hull, and exhausted its fuel in empty water. The second torpedo detected 2 signatures and chose the louder one. Neither weapon reached American steel. The Gerald R. Ford did not change course by a single degree. But the Nixie's performance demands honest scrutiny. It defeated 2 torpedoes. That is what happened. What the engagement does not answer, and what Iranian planners will extract as this episode's most actionable intelligence, is the system's saturation threshold. 1 decoy,
2 torpedoes, both defeated. The margin held. Whether it holds against 4 weapons on divergent bearings is a question this engagement answered only partially. The partial answer is not entirely reassuring. A more sophisticated adversary will not plan around 2 torpedoes. It will plan around the number that breaks the margin. 91 seconds after the Iranian launch, weapons release was authorized. The 4 Mark 54 torpedoes already in the water needed no repositioning. Active seekers, 37,000 pings per second. Closing speed 40 knots against a Kilo's maximum sprint of 17. Inside the submarine, incoming weapons were detected 22 seconds before impact. Emergency blow ordered, maximum speed ordered, evasive maneuvers executed correctly, professionally, by a crew that did everything their training demanded. None of it mattered. The math did not negotiate. The first Mark 54 struck the engine compartment, a 15-foot gash against a pressure hull stressed by 380 feet of seawater, flooding at 80,000 gallons per minute. The second torpedo arrived 9 seconds later. The Kilo imploded at 420 feet. 38 crew members lost. Engagement time from Iranian torpedo launch to destroyed submarine, 2 minutes 41 seconds. The submarine had not acted alone. It never does. 12 Iranian surface combat ships had departed Bandar Abbas 6 hours earlier, the swarm element of a coordinated strike. The doctrine is coherent. The submarine attacks first, pulling defensive attention downward, while the surface force closes to missile range under the resulting confusion. It's a strategy built on the assumption that the defender must triage threats, and that triage creates gaps. The assumption encountered a specific problem. The Americans had been tracking those 12 ships since they left port. Aegis systems aboard USS Delbert L. Black had pre-built firing solutions on every contact. At 0412, 24 SM-6 missiles launched simultaneously. 67 seconds, 0 Iranian launches. Iran's entire primary surface force in the strait ceased to exist before it fired a single weapon. Here is where the story of this engagement becomes more complicated and more honest.
2 Iranian fast attack craft were operating independently on the strait's northern margin, not part of the primary group, not fully integrated into the strike group's initial surveillance picture. Small, fast, decoupled from the main strike architecture. Whether by design or coordination failure, the result was the same. They fell between the gaps of a surveillance grid optimized for tracking the primary threat. Both reached weapons release. Both fired before being destroyed. One anti-ship missile was intercepted by USS McFall's close-in weapon system. The second impacted McFall's aft section. 7 Americans were killed. The ship's helicopter facilities were destroyed. A fire burned for 4 hours. McFall was withdrawn from the strike group. 7 dead. 1 destroyer combat mission killed. That is not a footnote. That is the engagement's most important tactical finding, and the finding that received the least attention in post-engagement briefings. The clean narrative of total American dominance required a footnote that 7 families would spend the rest of their lives knowing was not a footnote at all. Wars are decided by systems and doctrine. They are paid for by individuals. That accounting never appears in Pentagon briefings with the weight it deserves. The Tomahawk strikes on Bandar Abbas and the FA-18E strike package against coastal missile launchers produced results that diverged from pre-strike estimates. 11 cruise missiles destroyed pier infrastructure and maintenance facilities. 14 mobile launchers confirmed destroyed. But Iranian dispersal protocols worked better than surveillance had indicated.
An estimated 6 to 8 additional launchers survived by relocating outside mapped coverage areas. The coastal missile belt was severely degraded. It was not eliminated. The final accounting: 1 Kilo-class submarine and all 38 crew, 12 primary surface combatants, 1 submarine base, 14 confirmed launchers, against 7 Americans killed, 1 destroyer combat damaged and withdrawn, an unknown number of Iranian launchers operational at engagement's end. Gerald R. Ford undamaged. The strait remained open. Decisive American tactical victory, unambiguous, but not the clean, cost-free dominance that initial reporting implied. And that distinction matters enormously for what comes next. Iran's asymmetric doctrine failed at its foundational layer. The initiative advantage was stripped before the engagement began. That is the headline. But the doctrine's peripheral elements, the 2 fast attack craft that nobody was fully watching, retained lethal capability even as the primary architecture collapsed around them. 7 Americans died because of that residual lethality. A destroyer was pulled from the battle group because of it. A more sophisticated adversary, and there is one watching this engagement with analytical intensity from Beijing, will not attempt to replicate the Kilo attack or the surface swarm. Those failed completely and visibly. It will ask a different question. How do you scale the 2 fast attack craft? How do you build a strike architecture where the peripheral elements are not peripheral at all, where the primary strike is the decoy and the real threat is the one the surveillance grid isn't watching? That is the question Chinese naval planners are asking today. The South China Sea is not the Strait of Hormuz. PLN capabilities operate at a scale and sophistication that Iranian assets do not approach. DF-21D ballistic missiles are not Kilo torpedoes, but the core finding translates directly. Persistent surveillance can neutralize asymmetric doctrine's initiative advantage in constrained waterways, and the core vulnerability translates equally directly. Elements operating outside the surveillance picture retain engagement capability, regardless of how completely the primary architecture is defeated. American strategic response will accelerate investment in 2 directions simultaneously, extending distributed sensor coverage to reduce the gaps that peripheral elements exploit, and hardening carrier strike group defense against the saturation thresholds that the Nixie engagement did not fully answer. Both are expensive. Both are necessary. Both will be matched by Chinese counterinvestment in emissions control, independent strike elements, and surveillance denial technology. The Strait of Hormuz engagement did not end the competition between American naval power and asymmetric doctrine. It reframed it, raising the technical floor for both sides and accelerating the timeline toward a next-generation confrontation that will be fought with different tools at greater distances against an adversary that has studied every second of what happened here and drawn conclusions that American planners are only beginning to fully model. The Ford resumed flight operations at 0630. Breakfast was served on schedule. McFall was en route to Bahrain. At 420 feet, in crushed steel and absolute darkness, lay 38 men whose doctrine was coherent, whose execution was professional, and whose defeat had been sealed not when the Mark 54s struck, but 12 hours earlier when the first sonobuoy entered the water above them. They never knew they had already lost. That is the nature of information dominance done correctly. And somewhere in Beijing, analysts studying this engagement are working very hard to ensure that the next adversary knows exactly where the sensors are and plans around the spaces between them. The strait is open. The Ford sails on. 7 Americans do not. and the real competition has already moved to the next theater. It always does.